This is ChangeMakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
This week's Changemaker is Kimberly Black King, the Chief of Real Estate Development at Volunteers of America, one of the nation's largest developers and owners of affordable housing. Kimberly joined the VOA after 20 years in the affordable housing industry, which included her time as the Chief Development Officer at the DC Housing Authority, the Director of the Corporation for Supportive Housing's Mid-Atlantic office, and as a Senior Account Executive at Fannie Mae. Kimberly, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Katie. It's a pleasure to chat with you. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for making the time, and we have a lot of information I want to cover here about you, about Volunteers of America, and let's just start with how you got involved at Volunteers of America and really maybe talk about your onboarding within affordable housing.
Yeah, happy to. It's been a really interesting journey, and like many of my peers in this space, I actually landed here, by my good luck and fortune. I was planning to be a CPA, and really focused on a nice, solid career that would really be more of a means to an end, is how I looked at it, to provide, a nice quality of life. And so I'm really extremely grateful to know that something otherwise exists, because this is work that I find really, really rewarding. Fell into this world when a friend who was then the controller for a developer contacted me about a development accountant position. And that was my first random introduction to community development at McCormick Barron Salzar. When I went to McCormick Barron, I was just fascinated by the work that was happening, and pretty quickly moved away from accounting into a project management role, working on redevelopments of public housing sites through HUD's Hope 6 program, which, as you know, Katie, was one of HUD's initiatives to eradicate severely depressed and disinvested public housing sites. So I jumped around and learned as much as I could, jumping around in those projects at various stages. But my first project that I started at the concept stage was Arthur Blumeyer, which is now redeveloped as Renaissance Place, which has been done by McCormick Barron Salzar in partnership with the St. Louis Housing Authority. That project was, not unlike other Hope Sixes throughout the country, was just an enormous undertaking and required a lot of stakeholder engagement and partnership to really realize what that community could be, well beyond the focus on the bricks and mortar. And so through those community partnerships, we really wove together the adjacent sectors, including education, healthcare, employment, business sectors, and started working on the steering committee and really doing a deeper dive to what success would look like. And there's plenty of work for us to do all day long, just building affordable housing. But having that opportunity to connect the sectors and that overall sort of continuum, and really take a stab at addressing some of those more systemic changes that are necessary in these communities, was really powerful to me personally. I thought just really dynamic space to be in. And so it was really there. And at that time, and I can vividly remember it as if it were yesterday, at the beginning of that Arthur Blumeyer redevelopment, and working with the residents there and learning so much from the residents, and what their vision was for the project, and their desires, and all of the elements that were involved in that. And I knew that this work was really my calling. And I've been, very intentional and deliberate about the professional roles that I've taken on since then, and making sure that they really align with my desire for overall impact. It's very important to me. And so fast forwarding a bit, I came to DC as you mentioned, and recapping my resume, initially with a position with Fannie Mae to help expand their special affordable housing debt platform, and then went on to work for CSH in opening their Mid Atlantic office and did a lot of localized work in the district and really enjoyed that work in the district. Actually, really fortunate as well to still be working on some projects in my current role in the district. But the opportunity at Volunteers of America National Services was really attractive because it allowed me to return to a more national footprint with an organization with really deep reach. And so now here I sit at Volunteers of America and have oversight of our affordable housing portfolio, as well as I'm currently serving as the interim chief operating officer, which pulls in oversight of our healthcare senior living portfolio as well.
Before we move on to Volunteers of America, I actually remember Hope Six back in the day, and I worked on several of those way back. And I loved the before and afters, but Hope Six was so unique because it was on that maturity cycle of Hope Six, Choice Neighborhoods, now RAD. And it's
Mhm.
been a great journey for redevelopment and repositioning of assets. I think that now, when you look at what VOA and housing authorities are able to do, they have so many more tools by which they can do that. That now leads me to this national footprint you're talking about with VOA. What are some of your strategic development goals as an organization? Because you guys are really changing up who you are in the development space.
I'll take a step back to provide some overall context for how we're set up. Our parent organization is Volunteers of America Incorporated, which is a national nonprofit, faith based nonprofit that has 30 affiliates. 29 of those affiliates are locally based with their own bylaws, charter, their own board for their geographic footprint at the local level. So you may see those as VOA Florida. Here, covering the DC area, we have our VOA Chesapeake and Carolinas that covers the DMV as well as South and North Carolina. And so they are confined to that footprint. And they have a host of services, programs, and products that they deliver. Volunteers of America National Services, where I sit, is an affiliate of VOA that has a national footprint. We have two lines of business, and that's our healthcare senior living portfolio and our affordable housing portfolio. So we are fortunate in that we get to do work throughout the country. And we are in just about 40 states, the district, in Puerto Rico, and we get to partner with our local affiliates as well. So it's really an interesting opportunity. As we think about our strategic placement, we are really looking at how we can impact some of that disparity more intentionally through our partnerships. One is broadband access to, and making sure that we have a way to serve our seniors as technology grows and changes the way that seniors interact with healthcare. We saw this magnified during COVID when some of our communities in lower income residents didn't have that sort of access. And we were focused on that before. We actually partnered with AARP to do a demonstration across some of our projects in Colorado, where we dropped Alexas in our senior units to address social isolation. And again, this was about a year and a half before COVID. We were really thinking about using it in two ways: addressing social isolation, which can lead to adverse health outcomes, as well as thinking about how do we program our buildings where technology is moving super fast at lightning speed, and our development compared to technology moves at a snail's pace. So by the time we go through our pre-development and closing, it's a 5 or 6 year process, and we're seeing much newer technology. So how do we make our buildings think forward and make our buildings respond as sort of smart buildings, if you will. So really focused on technology is one of our strategic focuses, and the healthcare outcome. So the other side of our house, where we are providing senior living through assisted living facilities, memory care, skilled nursing facilities, we are really taking some of that expertise and thinking at concept phase on our affordable housing side, what is a healthcare goal that we can create through this project? And we know that housing is healthcare. So going one step beyond that, initially we started with, let's make sure that we have that broadband access throughout our entire building and not just the common areas. So it can be something like that, and to something much larger like a healthcare provider that has dedicated space or satellite space that is actually incorporated into our building. So really being intentional about pairing the healthcare outcome with our affordable housing is a huge initiative of ours.
So, has that always been part of the offerings that you guys have done, both the outcome or life driven healthcare component, and then additionally providing housing and a redevelopment? Has that always been there, or is that something you guys have just sort of like grown into, so to speak, as an organization?
It's been there by coincidence. So we would do our great work, and then we'd say, oh, like, wow, look at what we accomplished. And so now, having that intentionality behind it is literally part of our strategic plan. Our strategic plan that we most recently adopted, our number one aspirational goal is innovation around housing and healthcare. And that led us to our second goal, which is creating well being for both our residents and our staff. And thirdly, how that requires for us to think about partnerships differently. On the housing side, we think about a partner as Wells Fargo or Bank of America, Citibank, Lument, those that we do our development transactions with on our debt and equity side. Those commonly come to mind. My example with AARP didn't come to mind as organically or naturally, but now it does after we did the initiative. So the work was there, but now we are making sure that it's consistently there with that intentionality that I mentioned.
Before we move on to the development pieces, you said your strategic plan, the first one was innovation around housing and healthcare. You've mentioned AARP, memory care, broadband. What are some of the other examples of services that you're doing as part of your affordable housing offering?
So one of our, I'll call it one of our hallmarks is our resident coordinators that are in our buildings. We have about 75% of our portfolio is senior housing. In our senior housing, which really started with our first project that we did in our first federally funded project, which was in 1964 under HUD's 202 program. And so that's the program we really grew up on. We have resident coordinators in about 160 of those sites out of 230-ish. And that coordinator is essential. We find that in both our affordable projects and the sort of the market rate, we've got mixed income housing now. So in the market rate, all use the service coordinator. So we have a 91% participation rate where we have our service coordinator. People are engaging that service, and they really serve as a broker to the various stage services that the residents need. And there's a huge variation of what that can be. I don't know if you've ever been through a process where you have perhaps a parent who is a veteran and is entitled to or eligible for services. The amount of paperwork, the number of phone calls, it is a really daunting process for people who have access to resources, lots of resources to even go through that process. The number of people that don't even know, aren't aware of the resources that are out there, and benefit from being connected to those sort of resources and having some help to go through it is really important. And it can be transformational in terms of quality of life. It can be the difference between getting services and not getting services and the domino effect of that.
You said that 75% of your portfolios are serving seniors. About how many people are we talking about?
So in our Vones portfolio, so we have a roll up for all of our VOA affiliates, and that is number of properties. That's about 500 properties, about 23,000 units. That number represents our total portfolio for Volunteers of America. Vones has about 236, where we own, Vones solely owns 236 properties. It's about 14,000 units. And we are serving through our resident coordinators about 10,000 people,
Wow,
residents.
that's amazing. How's the participation like with the service coordinators?
So that's the 91%, about 91% where we have coordinators in our buildings. It's the participation rate is 91% of those are engaging with the service coordinator.
That seems incredibly high to me when you have that much participation with your residents. How are you getting such a high level there?
Well, I so they are on site. That's one. So it's not like a part-time position where they, are there 1 day a week or 4 hours a week. So they are there and they are regularly engaging. They are, again, the services that they provide can range from um, yoga, senior yoga, programming at the site, to partnering with providers that are external providers that we partner with outside the community. And again, in some cases, where we may have a provider coming in to the site to actually serve and do perhaps wellness checks and things like that. That, again, is one of the things that we're being very intentional about. We're wrapping up, by way of example, we're wrapping up construction on four rehab projects in Miami. And each are about 100 units of high rise senior housing and very little community space in these buildings. And they're 8-story concrete buildings. We identified a space on the second floor across from the elevator that we could build out as a provider room. So we have this wonderful provider space that is, it really could accommodate a part-time physician. So it has an exam room, it has a restroom, it has a waiting area, and that will house a service provider to come in and do wellness checks for our residents. And so that's one way that they can, in those particular examples, engage with our resident coordinator. So it's really about being present. It's about understanding what your community needs. We do annual surveys to determine what our residents want. And this is paired very closely with property management. So our property management is performed by our affiliate, where we have a local affiliate. And the projects that I just mentioned, the example with Miami, those projects are property management is performed by Volunteers of America, Florida. And they have an excellent property management outfit. And the resident coordinators are actually staffed by our property manager. They are supported by our resident services team that we have here at Volunteers of America National Services. So they provide them with sort of the technical support and all of that. But the resident coordinators themselves are on the site every day with project property management, working very closely with them to make sure that they are responding to the actual needs of the residents and that particular community, which varies from community to community, and that is helping us achieve those high outcomes like 91% versus just going in there with a sort of cookie cutter menu of services. We're not doing that. We're really capturing what is needed in response to the communities. Some of our communities in Miami, where these Sweetwater and Hialeah cities in Miami, where these properties are located, there's 98% of that population is Spanish speaking. And so English is not their first language. That may differ from, what our senior project in Boulder City, Colorado needs. So we really do respond to the community needs based on the characteristics and population that we have there.
Excellent. We've been talking about the needs of the tenant, and next I want to get into the needs of the market and more units, but we have to stop here. So coming up in the second part of my conversation with Kimberly Black King, the Chief of Real Estate Development at Volunteers of America, Kimberly shares how her childhood has fueled her passion for affordable housing.
It is certainly an honor and a duty that I serve in this capacity to sort of help pay it forward. And that is really how I view it. And the work couldn't be more important to me.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.